What if we could stop a war before it begins? That's one of the questions posed by Rhombus Power, the tech company behind AI security tool called Guardian. Rhombus likens it to a digital nervous system that utilizes all sorts of data to help predict conflict around the world before it begins. The company says it predicted Russia's invasion of Ukraine months before it happened. Rhombus has already partnered with several nations around the world, including the United States, its Air Force and Strategic Command. I'm joined now by the founder and CEO of Rhombus Power, Anshu Roy. Anshu, fantastic to have you on the show. It sounds like a lofty ambition, but a pathway to peace via technology seems to be your focus.
Absolutely, Julia. That's our focus. We believe that with data turned to insights, especially with forecasts and predictions, it is possible to find intervention points that can potentially avoid conflict.
We have all sorts of previous conflict data to in some way help us understand at least why conflicts begin, and it's a whole host of things: rival armed factions, sudden economic declines, ethnic, religious divisions, inequality. Just give us a sense of what the data inputs are into your system that allows you to model and then predict where you think conflicts may begin.
Yes, absolutely. So our artificial intelligence platform, especially for countries outside the United States, is called Ambient. And what Ambient does is it collects and connects publicly and commercially available data globally, trillions of data points every single day, across all domains: land, air, sea, space, cyber, information domains. And it does so via satellites, via sensors, terrestrial sensors, social and mainstream media, dark web, various data stores, and so on. And it basically connects that data and correlates and further reasons with events that are happening around the world, especially adverse events, to figure out what is the relationship at scale in order to then be able to forecast and predict what might happen in the future.
So if we use a real-world example, as I mentioned in the introduction, you utilized some of that data and whatever it was that you were recording and listening to, and then the AI system was analyzing, helped you predict the invasion of Ukraine by Russia months ahead of when it happened. Just explain the sort of inputs that went into that, and I'm assuming you notified relevant governments. As I mentioned also, you are working with a number of them.
Yes, absolutely, we did. And so just as an example, in this case, we were looking at, across Europe, we were looking at changes that were happening at military bases, at relevant bases that were tied to Russia. And we were observing their movements from satellites and from ground-based sensors, as well as ad tech data. And once we were able to do that in an automated way through our system, then it became pretty obvious months ahead of the conflict that they had plans and they intended to stay wherever they were moving to. And we were able to identify individuals who mattered at certain locations. And with that knowledge and some additional human judgment applied to it, which is really our expertise as well, we were able to then interpret down to the day when that invasion might happen. And this is where it becomes interesting, right? Everybody knew something would happen. Almost everybody knew something was going to happen months leading up to the invasion. But nobody could actually talk about when, especially from commercial and publicly available data sources. And that's where we excelled by the application of modeling and mathematical techniques that we use.
And I was going to say, that's the key difference, I think, between human intelligence that's being gathered all the time around the world, perhaps, versus a model like this that's collecting data and analyzing it in a different way. Very quickly, a separate example that just sprung into my mind was the Arab Spring and that uprising, and then how quickly that then filtered to other nations in the region. And I think in many respects that confounded most of, if not all of, the analysts that had been watching the region for many years. Hindsight's perfect sight, but would your model do you think have been able to predict that better than human intelligence did at the time?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because back in 2016, when this journey started for us, Arab Spring was the back test we ran. That was the first example we demonstrated to some of our customers here in the United States. And not only about being able to predict whether it would happen, that became obvious after very quickly, within a month of our getting into it and analyzing the information, but also what were the drivers? And they were unique to every country. And those drivers were staring at our faces within the data, those variables, and how one could have found some intervention points, especially related to things like climate change that were affecting many of those 20 countries that witnessed the Arab Spring revolution, and how that could have been a source of potentially maybe avoiding some of the challenges that we saw in the revolution.
That's such a great point. It might not be what you expected, but aspects like climate change, fueling things like inequality, if you can try and identify and address those things early, that's a very important message, I think, for us today. Do you think it replaces humans in the field and intelligence collectors in the field, or is this very different? And I think one of the other questions that people will be asking is, how is the data used? As you said, it's public, but this could also, as all technologies can be, perhaps be used for bad as well as good. Anshu, when you're collecting this kind of intelligence and information, how do you think about that? How do you protect from that?
Right. So the first part of your question, does it replace humans? And the answer is absolutely not. It empowers them. In fact, that can happen right now. It's available right now. This tool is ready. It actually gives humans their freedom of action back, especially leaders, to be able to make decisions early on, decisions that can potentially avoid the need for military action. It helps us win peace, I think, by doing so. And leaders become more important and not less, because with those insights, they can actually intervene. But the question then becomes, and this is an open question, how does our current systems across the world adapt and adopt to this rapidly changing technological landscape, especially embedding these insights into decision-making cycles that were largely manual and human-driven, a legacy of the way we've been doing intelligence for decades. The second part of your question, whether it could be used by bad actors, well, as far as we're concerned, we are allied to we only work with the United States and its allies and partners. The protection of this data is absolutely paramount for us, and we treat it with extreme care. And we are only trying to build this digital nervous system across democracies around the world and nations that are aligned with United States and its allies and partners.
I think anything we can do to head off violence and conflict in the world is a worthy mission. Anshu, I've run out of time. I have plenty more questions to ask you. I'm sure some of them were classified information and you wouldn't be able to give it to me anyway, but we'll stay in touch. Great to hear about what you and your team are doing. Thank you so much for your time.